All right, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are turbocharging an IS200 and I'm gonna show you how we do it. Now, this is the car that you guys recognize from the previous videos where we put a Haltech in a stock IS200. Since then, we've actually done a lot of mods to the car. It's fully turbocharged. We've done some internal upgrades as far as valve springs and camshafts and stuff like that. We're gonna cover all that in today's video. But before the video starts, I just wanna cover one thing so it doesn't look like I just put on 20 kilos in the video. I'm fairly time poor, so a lot of these videos that I post were recorded earlier in the year. And earlier in the year, I had a little bit of a medical problem, so I was on some heavy steroids and that made my face a bit puffy. So I am on the road to recovery now, so I'm getting a bit healthier. So I'm starting to edit these videos and post them up. So all videos you see with this car, as well as my pro drift car IS200 with the 2J, all those videos will record early in 2025 or midway through 2025, and I'm just editing and posting them now. I don't have a lot of time to edit videos and sometimes the motivation just isn't there. So I'll do my best to get them out as quick as I can. But today, please enjoy us turbocharging this IS200 and going over a few tips and things like that with the whole process. Let's get into it. All right, back on Cooper's IS200 today. This is the one that we did the Haltech install and the valve springs and a turbo time. So obviously those were just precursor mods. We knew we were going to turbo it. The time has come the following day. Process is very, very simple. There's not a lot of things to do. It's probably like a 10-step process. So we'll just quickly go over all the things that we're going to do. We'll get it back on the dyno and see what it makes. And we'll start showing you some of the parts that you can get to turbo your car and make it easy. There's a few specific things, but it's fairly basic. We've already done the upgraded injectors out of a 1G-FE using the Race Concepts harness adapters. Haltech Elite 750 with the Airflex plug and play unit. We're also using a turbo manifold from Airflex Australia, tubular high-rise manifold. I've already fitted a few things like a boost controller to it. So it's pretty much, we just got to do the mechanicals and it'll be good to go. It's already got the mechanical throttle body conversion as well. So first thing that Cooper's doing is just taking the headers off, which is a bit of a pain, but I'll show you how to do it. So basically getting the bolts off is nice and simple, but the cats are very large. So what you need to do is down there, there's a steering linkage, and you just undo the steering linkage and take the uni out, and then that gives you heaps more room to get the cats out and the headers out. All right, a little bit of progress here. Got the old parts off, headers out, everything out there is out, and then we've got making some fuel lines. Turbo Smart fuel reg is fitted, and then a return line back to the tank. I'll show you what we do in the tank in a second. But up here, all we've got is a -6 fitting straight off the fuel rail. That's an M16 thread on the rail, and we just go to a -6 into the reg, out of the reg into the tank. And then what we've done here is modified the VVTi oil feed bolt. All right, so this bolt here is for the VVTi oil feed traditionally. That's the stock bolt. All we do is drill a hole in it, and then you can tap it, or we just weld a fitting to it. So I just welded a -4 fitting to there, and then that will supply oil to our turbo. We'll drain it back into the sump, and that's the loop done. Also, because we've got a ball bearing turbo, we're gonna run coolant lines. And then for that, we're just gonna intercept where the throttle body gets its coolant from usually. Being in Australia, we don't really need the coolant lines going to the throttle body because they don't freeze. It doesn't get below freezing here. So we're just gonna steal these coolant lines and run them to the turbo. All right, now we've got our stock fuel hanger here, and we're just gonna modify it to take a return. So we've got your feed and your plug. You can use a bulkhead fitting, which is definitely what you should use here, but it's a Sunday and we haven't got anything. So just got a bit of hard line that we're gonna epoxy into there. Pretty simple, just put a fitting or whatever, and then run your return into it, and then drain that back into the tank. Make sure you hook up the jet valve, otherwise you will have issues with running out of fuel. All right, that's our little return fitting. And then there's no pressure in this, so it doesn't really matter that it's not barb, but ideally you would want something with a barb. Like I said, no pressure, so it shouldn't be an issue. And then we can put some sealant on there and it'll be good to go. Okay, so the stock hanger is modified now. So we've got our power in, fuel feed, and then the fuel will go to the engine, back to this return, down into the return, back into the stock jet valve that will separate it between the tanks. We've put an upgraded pump in here, just a Raceworks 340 litre an hour pump. Clamp the stock fuel pressure reg shut. So I've just put it in the vise and clamp the end of it shut. So that does nothing now, but you still need to put it back in there so you have fuel pressure. And then we've just modified the bottom hanger to accept the bigger pump. And now that's ready to go back in. And we'll put some sealant on there to seal that up, but there's no need for a barb or anything because there's no pressure here. And then if you look inside, it's probably hard to see, but got her hose clamp on the other side of this fuel hose. So that should be all good to go. Chuck this in the car. We'll get it going. All right, so we're up to the point of drilling the turbo drain now. Best way to do it is pull the sump off and obviously drill a hole, prep it all and weld it. But we don't really care about this engine. It's got almost 400,000 Ks and it's already pretty noisy. So we've got a steel -10 weld on fitting here, and we've overfilled the engine with engine oil. So what we're gonna do now is drill, hoping that any swarf will come out, and then any swarf that does make it in will just immediately get drained in this scrap oil. It's not a perfect solution. Do not recommend you do this. Best way is to jack up the car and pull the sump off, but like I said, this has worked pretty well in the past, so this is what we're gonna do. It's not gonna spill. Remember when I said it's not gonna spill? I fully lied. Well, I aimed that pretty well. Now I've drilled the hole, I'm just gonna prep the surface just with a flat disc, still leaving the oil in there, so any swarf will go straight down into our waste oil. Okay, so not the prettiest thing, but I've just tacked it in like 4 or 5 spots. If you're really good at welding, you could probably weld the whole thing slowly around, but easiest thing, just get it to this point and then take some like JB Weld or RTV silicone or whatever and just seal it up and that'll be done. All right, so we're basically ready to fit the turbo manifold and turbo and everything like that. I'll show you the assembly that we've got. First thing here, we've got all of our lines plumbed. So we just did the oil drain on the sump and we're just gonna use a bit of high temp hose to connect it to the turbo. Got our oil feed here, that's just a -4 hose that goes to that VVTi fitting. And then we've got our 2 coolant lines that are just tapped off the throttle body hoses and they'll just go straight to the turbo there. So what we're gonna do now is install the turbo. Now I've got our tubular manifold here. And we've got a 40mm Turbo Smart wastegate fitted to it, and our turbo is a GDX 2867R Gen 2, but it's a pretty good size. We'll keep the rods happy because it will spool a little bit later. And we pretty much just fixed this turbo because it was cheap. So it's easiest to get all of this on as one assembly. You can sort of put the manifold on and then put the nuts on later, but it's a little bit easier just to put it all on as one. All right, so that is our oil drain all done. So we've got some high temp hose here. It's -12 size, so it goes over the -10 hard line. And I've just made, it's probably pretty hard to see, but I've just made a -10 hard line to clear the manifold, and it actually runs between the runners. And then we've just got a bit of soft line to connect it to the sump, and then just a little barb fitting straight into the sump. That's all we need. So that's our turbo all plumbed. All right, pretty much the last step of the process is the intercooler and charge piping. Got the intercooler mounted up here, just on a couple little brackets off the crash bar. Now, obviously we have the facilities here to do all sorts of custom fab piping, but in the interest of making this DIY friendly, we've just gone ahead and bought a cheap intercooler pipe kit off eBay. It just comes with a bunch of, you know, silicone joiners and pipes and stuff. Yeah, it just comes with a bunch of like miscellaneous silicone joiners, and then a bunch of miscellaneous bends and pipes and T-bolt clamps and stuff like that. Nothing special, but they work pretty well. So we're just gonna work out a way to route this that requires hopefully no welding. And yeah, that way we can get the charged air out of the turbo, through the cooler and into the engine. Now to show you what we've done for the intercooler mounts, it's basically just the stock crash bar and then just some aluminium angle brackets straight off it that mount it. And that should fit behind the stock bumper. We might have to clearance a few things, but all we've done is notch the bonnet latch support to let the intercooler go back a little bit more. And then what I'm thinking is we run like a 180 on either side to a silicone joiner, to a 90, and then to a 45 up to the throttle body. And then we've just put the air temp sensor straight in there. And then on this side, I'm thinking we come out of the turbo and either go straight down past the rail and into the intercooler, or we do a 90 straight off the turbo, poke a hole here, and then go down into the cooler. I'll figure it out and we'll see what it looks like. All right, so intercooler piping is all done. We came up with a fairly decent way to do it. It's not the prettiest thing. We could make it a little bit nicer, but everything fits behind the stock bumper. And you can pretty much not tell that the car has a turbo, which is what we're going for here. Fairly stealth sort of sleeper look. Routing is very simple. We didn't cut any holes or drill anything in the chassis. It all runs pretty simple, so I will show you how it runs. So as promised, there's no welding or anything. Silicone joiner off the turbo, does a 90 and then another 90, comes down here to a 180, and then obviously the intercooler, another 180 on this side. Don't worry about that dent, I accidentally dented it. And then yeah, a 180 around the frame rail, and then a 90-degree up, piece of straight pipe, and then a 45 into the throttle body. We've still got to put an air temp sensor in, but let's not worry about that for now. And then our coolant lines are all plumbed, pretty close to some hot parts, so we heat sleeve them. Just 2 lines that go straight into these factory hard lines that were for the throttle body. The orientation doesn't matter. And then our oil feed comes straight from here into the turbo. Probably not the easiest thing to see, but our oil return is a hard line, so an aluminium hard line that goes down there, straight under, clears the manifold. Once it's cleared the manifold, it's just a straight run into the sump. Down here, I've made a quick little screamer pipe, just a dump for the wastegate. So I've got the Turbo Smart external wastegate down there, and it just vents to atmosphere there. Now all that's left is we've got to get an exhaust made. I'm just going to do a 3-inch pretty much the whole way through. And we've got a 3-inch intake, just with a little air filter. All that's left other than that is just to plumb up this boost controller, and we'll get the first start and we'll see how it sounds. All right, so now that the intercooler piping's all done, we've got the Lexus on the hoist, and we've just had a exhaust made for it, so I'll just show you that. So we've got a 3-inch downpipe that comes down, and then just a 3-inch exhaust, stainless steel, a little hot dog muffler here, and then some nice twin tips at the back. Looks pretty good. It's all V-band, removable sections. We've got a port here for an O2 sensor. It's not being used at the moment because we're just going to use the one on the dyno for now, and we'll fit a wideband to it at a later date. The scraping pipe is just sitting there. We probably will route that out here somewhere, but just for now that'll do. And then we've got the vacuum lines for the wastegate all hooked up, and that's it for the underside. And then up here, it's pretty simple. You know, just a 3-inch downpipe, clears the steering shaft and everything. And then we've just cable tied the heater lines out of the way. So just to recap, we've got a Haltech Elite 750 ECU from the last episode, and then we fitted a Turbo Smart fuel reg, an upgraded pump in the hangar with a return line, and then we've got our Dash 4 AN oil feed, 2 Dash 6 coolant lines that just go to the throttle body fittings, a tubular exhaust manifold, a Dash 10 oil drain, and then our universal eBay intercooler piping kit. And then I've just thrown on this 3-inch intake. It's not necessary, you can just use a bend. This is just something that I fabbed up. It looks a little bit nicer, and we've rerouted the breather just to the factory hose, so when it comes on boost it will be pulling vacuum on the crankcase. Got the boost controller hooked up to the ECU through the stock wiring, and hooked up the vacuum lines to the wastegate. And we've also, from last time, we've got upgraded valve springs, and we've got the 1G-FE injectors. So I've double checked that everything's tight. All that's left is we'll do a first start. The ECU is already mapped for these injectors, so it will run. So we'll start it up and we'll just check for any leaks, anything like that. And if it's all good, we'll get it on the dyno and we'll make some power. So on the first start, I'm just looking around all the areas that we've touched, and I'm just making sure that, you know, there's not oil and there's not coolant just spewing out. First glance, looks like everything's okay. Main thing to check is just where all the fittings are. Also, we've touched the fuel system, so we want to make sure there's no fuel coming out. First thing I did is when I touched the key, it primed the pump, and I just made sure that fuel wasn't leaking from anywhere. Everything looks all good. So what we'll do is we'll get this off the hoist onto the dyno, and we'll see what sort of power it makes. It's been a little while since the last video, so there's a bit of a time disparity, but we've done a few more upgrades, so I'm going to go over those, and then we're going to tune it and see what it makes. All right, now you might notice that the motor setup looks a little bit different. Obviously, the valve cover is now painted, and we also rewrapped the stock wiring harness just to neaten it up a little bit. The stock harness was falling apart, like the sleeving and stuff like that, so we just wrapped it up. Also fitted a wideband sensor with the Haltech setup. And then the main upgrade that we did is we fitted the Airflex Lab Stage 3 cams. Now, specs on these are 272 duration, 248 at 50, and 10.5 mil of lift. Now, it sounds like that 272 duration wouldn't really be that aggressive, but that 248 at 50 is the number that actually matters. If you compare it to like a JZ cam, that's closer to like a 290 advertised, something like that. But the cams are super aggressive, so we should make a good power. Now, we're still on 1J injectors and pump fuel, 98. Now, since we've fully deleted the stock ECU, there's no knock control with the Elite 750. Now, usually when you have a piggyback or a fuel cut defender, the ECU detects knock and fully retards the timing, so you don't make a lot of power. But with the Haltech, we can put the timing at whatever we want, enough to blow up the motor. So what I've done here is right there, I fitted a knock sensor, a wideband knock sensor. And when I'm tuning the car, I'll have my headphones on connected to that sensor, so I can actually monitor for knock, and I'll optimize the ignition timing, and we'll see how much power we can squeeze out of it. All right, now the car is running on the dyno, the first thing I always check is the ignition timing. So on the Haltech, I'm gonna set it at 0 or whatever engine you have. Just look at the service manual and see what marks line up with top dead center. If you don't have any marks, you can actually turn the engine top dead center, mark somewhere on a pulley, and then use the timing light to sync that up. So in the Haltech, I've got it set at 0, and all I'm doing is firing the timing light just to make sure we're bang on 0. Right, now since we have the bigger cams, the engine's gonna struggle to idle because there's so much overlap. So what I'm gonna do is actually set the idle screw a little bit deeper so the engine can idle a little bit more stable. All right, so a lot of the tuning process here, getting the car running, timing everything, and then it's a matter of getting the car to idle nicely, however it needs to idle. And before we do any power runs or anything, it's a lot of just putting the clutch in, taking off, and just making sure the car takes off nicely without any hesitations or buckling or anything like that. All right, now on the dyno, first thing I do is just a lot of steady state tuning and getting the drivability nice, making sure the AFRs are good and you're not just wasting fuel. Now at this point, I have the O2 control turned off, and I have the ignition table super safe, so everywhere in boost it's like 10 degrees or so, and all I'm doing is rowing through the gears and making sure everything is nice. All right, now that I'm happy with how the car runs, it revs nicely, it drives smoothly, the AFRs are good, it's not gonna be overly wasteful on fuel. Everything's pretty efficient, and I get a pretty good idea for how the map's gonna look. I've tuned dozens and dozens of 1Gs, 1Js, RBs, whatever engine, so I have a pretty good reference point of how the engine's gonna run. And just from background knowledge, I know pretty much what sort of timing it's gonna like for that particular turbo and given setup. So I'm gonna punch some base values in. Now we can get to steady state and doing power runs. And then yeah, the car will be tuned, so let's get into it. Knock is on, and I'm always listening for knock, and I'm always watching the AFR during the pull. So if there's any knock, or if it goes too lean, let off. Alright, so I've done a few power runs, finished tuning the car. We've got a sort of baseline reading. We're going to start about here, 195 kilowatts. It's a pretty hot day, it's 35 degrees in the dyno room, so you know, there's a bit of correction, but the car is definitely not at its peak power. It's a fairly small, just a cheap intercooler on it. So there definitely is gains to be had with better parts. It's only a cheap turbo, cheap intercooler, you get the idea. But ignition table's mapped out very nicely, fuel table's perfect, and basically no corrections anywhere. So I'm very happy with how it's running. Power band is fairly peaky, just to keep the rods in the block. It's sort of important to bring the torque on as RPM comes on, so there's a little bit less inertia on the rods. Now, obviously you can see as the RPM comes on, the torque sort of stays fairly low, and then there's a sharp increase toward the top end. The dyno doesn't apply load exactly like the road does, so you actually often find that the car spools a little bit different on the street, but you get the idea. But a good way to visualize why we want to bring the torque on a little bit later is like take a heavy object, and if you just hold it, it's pretty light, easy to hold. But if you then drop it, there's more weight. So basically, if you take a bowling ball and you hold a bowling ball, you can hold it just fine. But if someone throws a bowling ball at you at 20 k's an hour, you're probably not going to catch it. So same sort of thing with the block. When everything's spinning and moving very quickly, there's a lot more stress, a lot more load on anything. If we shift the power band up, we sort of minimize how hard everything's getting hit at low RPM, and the engine wants to turn, and it wants to move that weight a little bit easier. So probably not the best example, but you get the idea. But yeah, that's the result of doing turbo kit on this IS200. And there we have it. The IS200 is done, turbocharged, ripping around. We're actually doing some more upgrades to it at the moment, so those will be in a future video. But let me know if you want to see anything else in terms of setting up a drift car, like angle setup, suspension setup, steering, things like that. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. Sorry I haven't been posting too much. It's very hard for me to edit these videos and, you know, continue running the business. It's a bit full on at the moment, but I'll try my best to get them out as much as I can. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.